This week, how do you and the offensive staff get the offenses back into the rushing attempt / pass attempt balance that they had during the win streak?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is you can't put yourself in a hole early, which is what we've done a couple of times, and and once you get into that situation, those circumstances, it's tough to dig yourself out of it, and so we've got to be very aware of that. You can't turn the ball over early either. That's probably one of the bigger things that we've got to handle better.
Ron, what do you remember about the week of Week 17 last year when Kyle's preparing to be the starter? Just his focus, mentality, attitude, anything from that time?
Well, the biggest thing I remember is it's no different than it's been. I think, once he knew he was a starter, I think his approach, has always been the same since. And it's interesting to watch him, practice today. He had a good practice, came out, did some really good things. He's confident, in his abilities. We're confident in his abilities. And, as I look at the game plan and look at the things that Norv wants to do, I see us doing the things that he's capable of. So I feel really good about it. Again, like I said, I just thought he had a good day today.
Would the preference be to give Will kind of this whole year as sort of like a red shirt, or obviously if Kyle?
Well, it is. The preference is, we're going to play the best quarterback we have right now, and right now the guy who's playing really well for us has been Kyle. He's had a couple of tough games, but I don't think it's reflective of who he really is as a football player. And I think the thing we all, again, have to continue to remember is, this really is, he's only been our starting quarterback for, 8 games, I think it is. So I think that's one thing, too, that we all got to, be realistic about. He's still growing, still learning. He still is a work in progress. There will be a point where he no longer will be a work in progress, but I don't think it's right now. And if Will gets an opportunity or doesn't, it's going to be based on what happens as we go along the season. I can't predict that, and I can't speculate on that. If he doesn't get any chances, that means Kyle's continuing to play well, and he's staying healthy. So that's probably the biggest thing, Joe.
Ross, I think, has played 80% of the snaps ever since he filled in for Dante Jackson when he missed time. Did not having him out there have an impact on this defense?
I think it does. I think he's a good football player, and I think the thing that you wish you had all your guys available and ready to roll, but you don't. But you do miss him. You do miss the things that he does for you when he does get his opportunities. And when you don't have him, we scramble a little bit. We went into a game with having to bring a couple players in that weren't with us initially, and I think that's impacted our roster obviously a little bit.
The Saints doing defensively so well that they hadn't done as much over the last couple of years?
Well, I think they're getting good pressure on the quarterback. I think that they're very opportunistic, getting takeaways. They're a good football team, and it's not just what's going on with what's happening on their defense, but what's happened on their offense as well. They've controlled the pace of play. They've controlled the time of possession. They've controlled field position. You do that as a team. You just don't do that as a defense or as an offense, but you do it as a whole team with special teams included.
Third downs are always important in every game. It looks like it's going to be even more important this game with them being one of the best on both sides of the ball and you guys in the 20s on both sides of the ball. How do you just get better at that, especially on defense from here?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you got to be better on first and second down as well. You look at some of the things that happened last week. We put ourselves in a couple of really good positions, and unfortunately had a couple of big plays on third down that hurt us. Most notably the one just before halftime. It was one of those things that was if you can prevent a play like that, it changes the whole scope of things going into the halftime.
Ron, we're used to seeing Christian on this injury report.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing, or?
Well, it's a very good thing. I think, again, the thing you got to understand about it is if a guy comes out of a game with a nick or anything like that, you got to put him on the report. And so he came out last week with a foot, so we had to put him on the report. The foot didn't impair him from playing or anything like that the rest of the game, but you have to do it by rule, so that's why he was on it. He wouldn't have been on it last week if he didn't have that. So, just so you guys know, but he came out of the game. He felt really good. He told us he wanted to work today, as opposed to having the quote unquote new normal where he does limited things on Wednesday. So, We had him out there. We had him participate, and he did exactly what he always does when he does practice, and that's practice hard.
Is having a guy like that say, I want to practice on Wednesday when, he's normally had that day off, is that kind of showing his leadership and?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's important. Guys see guys that, are doing the things that he does, they earn the right of and respect of their teammates. When they see a guy come out and practice, yeah, that's big. That's huge.
I feel like because of the week-to-week nature of this league, that when you guys do have a little bit of a rough stretch like you've had, when Kyle has a rough stretch like that, it can be almost over-exaggerated, and it can go too far into the disrespect, into the kind of the negative aspect of how you guys are playing.
You know how I feel about that. I mean, you're the ones who can best answer it because you're the ones who ask the questions that bring those things up. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. And I'm trying to make sure everybody understands that, here's a young man, a young quarterback who's as I said, this is what is going into his 9th start, who's done a lot of good things for us. He's had a couple of rough games, okay? We understand that. We get that. And I take it back, this is his 10th start. But that's going to happen, and those are going to be the growing pains. Now there's going to be a point where that's no longer there. The process is over, and there's no longer a crutch saying that he's young. So as he continues to work and grow, we're going to have some positives. We're going to have some negatives. How he rebounds, how we respond to it, how we react, that's going to be what's more telling. I think that's what's more important. And so far, I think he's handled it the way you would hope he would. He's been very graceful with it, very gracious with the compliments, understandably disappointed when he hasn't played well. And he's the first one to admit it. I think he's one of his own worst critics because he is tough on himself. But he's also taken responsibility. I know he's taken responsibility with me. He and I have had a couple of great conversations about it. And, and when he wants to beat himself up, I've had to tell him, hey, it's time to let it go. And he's been really good about that. So I appreciate that and who he is. And it's been really good. It really has.
Ron, in watching film and playing against him several times, what makes Michael Thomas difficult to defend?
I think the biggest thing that he does that the really, really good receivers do is they go get the ball. Some guys run really good routes. Some guys run in front of people, and they wait for the ball to come to them. He runs good routes. He runs ahead of people, but he goes gets the ball. He doesn't let the ball come to him. And I think that's a quarterback's best friend is when a guy gets the ball. He plucks the ball. He doesn't let that ball hang out there. He's got tremendous focus and concentration. Some guys, they feel it, they see it coming, and they take their eyes off for a second. This guy is, there's a reason why he's leading the league. There's a reason why he's one of the best in the league because he gets the ball.
Back to what Josh was talking about, we always talk about sudden change on the field. What about for you as a head coach or some of your coaching staff when you have sudden change you have a veteran quarterback, and then all of a sudden you have a young quarterback now has 10 starts, and now he's doubled his starts halfway through the season. The sudden change for you in the way you approach?
Very much so, and how your approach is, the way you look at things, the way you handle things. It does change your thinking, your thought process. Where we typically would be backing off on things, we can't. Because he's got to continue to get those reps, and we've talked about this before about other positions as well. And at this position even more so. You got to get 5,000 reps before things start to become second nature, and that's one of the things that we're working on. So with him, we've got to keep this level of work going, and it'll be the same thing for Will. Will's got to get as many snaps as he can, and it's been tough trying to make sure that you get that kind of work. And the hard part is, by working him, some of the older guys or guys that you want to rest can't rest. They've got to continue to work because you've got to build this cohesiveness, this bond, that how this guy's going to be. How this guy's going to come out of his route. Where this guy's going to be in protection. Those things are only, things that you can only get either by playing or by practicing. And, when you get to this time of year, things are supposed to be changing a little bit. We can't. So it kind of has changed our approach in the way we do things as a coaching staff, in dealing with our young players.
How much of that is predicated on how you protect Kyle?
Are you talking about pass protection, or are you just talking about? Well, I think the thing that, has to happen obviously is, we have some young guys that are playing, and they've got to continue to work through it. And, I know sometimes some of it is on how we want to rig the protection where we involve the back, we involve the tight end, we turn the line one way or the other. We ID a guy as this is our starting point, those types of things. Do we run deep routes? Do we run shallow routes? Or is it 3-step, 5-step? What's the timing and getting the ball out of his hands? All those things play into it. Those are all things that Norv has to think about as he's game planning, he's designing how we want to do things. It is, and it has changed things. It's one thing when you have a veteran guy that's been through it, that understands it, that it is second nature to him because he's had all these reps. But when you have a young guy, a new guy, you got to make sure he understands, that, hey, the reason why we're calling this protection this way is because we want to get the ball out of your hand quickly. The reason why we're calling this protection this way is because we want you to be able to hold the ball and throw the ball downfield. Those are all things that he has to make sure he understands, because you don't want him to, take a 5-step drop when he should be throwing the ball now. And so, again, it's all part of the learning process.
Does it help your cause when you're talking to Kyle about overcoming a 4-interception game, when you see somebody like Phillip Rivers on Monday Night Football, a guy that's been around the league forever, do the same thing?
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, you could say, hey, look, even Phillip does it, or even this guy does with that guy. But, at the end of the day, it's really about who the young man is. And again, I think Kyle gets it and understands that these things are going to happen. And I told you guys one time, hey, I've been in this league long enough to feel games. I know what games are like. I know what they feel like when the snowball starts going downhill and you can't stop it. And I've been on both sides of that. And it's the same thing when, it's something will happen and it clicks. And next thing you know, he's on a roll. So again, that's what you're working towards is you want to get to that point where everything just flows your way. The ball technically bounces your way.
Ron, on Michael Thomas again, in addition to leading the league in receiving yards and catches, also got a high volume of targets, pretty high above the next most guy. Do they do a pretty good job of just, Trey Boston was saying they move him all across the formation, at the 1, the 2, the 3, to just try to force him to be involved in the game in some ways?
I think he has a plan, and I don't, I'm trying to speculate on Sean Payton and what his thought process is, but he's got more than one weapon. And so if you focus strictly on him, he's got Alvin Kamara. He's got Teddy Ginn. He's got a couple of tight ends that catch the ball well. He's got guys that can get vertical very quickly. So you have to be careful, and you got to pick your opportunities to do certain things against them. So you have to just know and anticipate, okay, he's got him over here. Hey, we can do this with our coverage. Hey, he's got him over here. We got to be alert to this. I mean, he really, what Coach Payton does is, is he really tasks you. And so, and he knows this, it makes you as a defensive coach, you have to really prepare for more than just one thing. And so that takes a little bit of your time, it takes a little bit of the player's time, as opposed to if you're preparing for somebody where, hey, he's always going to line up here, he's always going to line up there.
I don't know if you saw David Tepper's comments this week about when we talked to him earlier this week, but he mentioned not accepting mediocrity and that sort of thing. When you hear the owner talk about those sort of things, do you have any response to that or any thoughts on?
That's to be expected. I mean, that's what it's about. This game's about winning. This game about anything else other than winning. And so this is my 33rd year. I get it. So, when I hear him talk about and say the things that, he should say so that our fans understand that, hey, I don't accept it either. And that's something that everybody has to understand. We don't accept it. And if it happens, it happens. But you've got to be able to turn it around and get it going in the right direction. So, if it's out there, it's out there. But that's the truth. And so we live with it and we go forward and we do our best and we go out and play as hard as we can and see what happens. Like I tell everybody, that's why we play on Sunday.
Last one, Chris. I'm sorry, can you talk about the observations of their defense and what you have to prepare for going against that defense?
Probably one of the things is I really think a lot of the things that they do starts with their front. I think they got a very good defensive front. I think they got good tackles that push very well. I think they've got 2 outside edge guys that get vertical very quickly and attack. But I also think that in Cameron Jordan, they've got a versatile player that creates problems where you have to ID where he is. It's kind of like he's kind of like their Michael Thomas on the offensive side. I mean on the defense side, you got to know where he is. He comes off the ball, he makes things happen, and you've got to be aware of where he is. So to me, just looking at them, it starts up front. Now they've got quality guys at linebacker that can run well. They've got a bunch of first rounders, all from Ohio State in the secondary that are very good football players. So you got to give them credit. They've done some really good things on defense this year, especially when when they felt they had to step up. When Drew was down, Teddy Bridgewater came in and managed things very, very well for him, helped them win football games. But the defense also stepped up very well. So it's a very well-rounded football team that we're facing.
Ron, were those boxing gloves you had on today the ones that you wore in All or Nothing also?
No, those are the ones that we have specifically for our running backs.
You like getting in there and doing that?
Yeah, it's fun. It is. All right.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
Guys, Sean Payton conference call will be within the next 5 minutes.